Kevin Harvick confirms he'll join the Fox Sports booth in 2024. NASCAR will not race Auto Club in 2024. And Jimmie Johnson confirms that he'll run the Chicago Street Course. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start by talking about Clutch Vodka. As it was announced on Saturday afternoon that Clutch Vodka is going to sponsor Timmy Hill in multiple races in 2023 in the number 13 car. Other sponsors will sponsor Timmy Hill throughout the season, including Prime Energy, among other companies that will sponsor Timmy Hill throughout the season. Glad to see the Clutch Vodka stepping up to the plate to sponsor Timmy Hill this season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Monster Energy. As expected, Monster Energy is going to sponsor Ty Gibbs for a majority of races in 2023. Monster Energy has been a big backer of Ty Gibbs, I think, for the last couple of years, especially in the Xfinity Series the last 2 years, so not a shock and not a surprise. They will continue sponsoring. It's unclear how many races, but a majority of races tells me that it's going to be more than half a season. So really excited to see for sure. Happy to see that they will go ahead and sponsor him, and really glad to see that they'll sponsor him for a lot of races this season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ally. As it was officially announced yesterday that Ally has become the official banker of NASCAR replacing PNC. Ally's had a big partnership in NASCAR for the last years with Hendrick Motorsports and Nashville, and now they become the official bank. This is really good news. This does not affect the situations with Nashville and Alex Bowman's contract with Hendrick Motorsports, but they're very happy with Alex Bowman. So I would have to think this is a really good sign toward the future for Alex Bowman returning to the team next year. Overall, this is really good news, and glad to see Ally will be the official bank of NASCAR. This is really great news, and I'm happy to see this for sure. Really good news for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Travis Pastrana. As it was officially reported on Friday, and this week, Travis Pastrana is going to be running a UMP modified at Volusia from February 6th to 11th. Travis Pastrana, of course, will be attempting to make the 2023 Daytona 500, is getting some help from Steve Arpin to get him prepared for the 2023 Daytona 500. He will also have Black Rifle Coffee on that UMP modified. This is really great news to see. Very happy to see that Travis Pastrana is going to get that experience. He's definitely going to need that experience for sure. This is really good, really exciting stuff, and glad to see that he will be running that in 2023 and running it to get prepared. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Rayom Brothers Racing. As a couple days ago on Friday, Rayom Brothers Racing provided an update in regards to their situation from the fire. They basically have had a lot of help from multiple organizations to try to get their cars and trucks prepared, and they seem like they're ready to go and get the season rolling. The NASCAR opinion will support a team no matter what. Unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, they suffered a fire, which was really unfortunate stuff, which, again, was really unfortunate. But I'm glad to see that they're in good shape. Seems like they're ready to go for the season, which is absolutely good news to hear considering what happened. And I'm glad to see that at least everyone is okay in that situation. Glad to see that everyone was all right. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ware Racing. Now, Ware Racing and Bob Cox reported this on Saturday that Ware Racing has had a swap in their points. The 15 and 51 car have gone ahead and swapped their points for the season. That means that the 51 car is actually now in the danger zone, and if it does end up finishing lower than the bottom 3 in points this year, it could have their charter revoked, which could hurt Ware Racing in the long run, though NASCAR really has not done a revoking of the points. It's definitely going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to that situation, but I don't know if we will see a revoking points, but it's interesting that they've swapped. I wonder what other moves have been made when it comes to swaps and points and all that kind of stuff, because there's probably been some changes. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the 42-point swap for the 77. We'll have to see what kind of swapping is in the upcoming weeks, but there's been some changes in regards to that going into this season. It's definitely going to be interesting to watch. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Radioactive. As Fox, throughout the season, as it is the 75th NASCAR season, Fox is going to be doing classic radioactives on their channel in 2023. These will include the 1998 Daytona 500, a race from 1997, I think the Southern 500 from 1997, and other classic radioactives as well. this is a really good touch. We're seeing a lot of the networks basically getting involved, and we're seeing a lot of NASCAR partners in general partnering up for the 75th year. We've had the copyright video come out. I have to say that copyright video, Lefty was part of that, and he did a really good job on that. But I think this is really cool, doing like really classic radioactives throughout the year. Of course, radioactive will still continue in its traditional form, but I love the fact that they are changing it up for this year, and they're doing classic radioactives. So I think that's some really exciting stuff. I think that's really awesome and great, and glad to see that they're doing that for 2023. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about RSS Racing. As RSS Racing's 2023 crew chief lineup has been officially revealed. So, for the 28 car, which will be, I believe, driven by Kyle Sieg throughout the year, Brad Parrott is going to be the crew chief. For the 38 car, which will have Joe Graf Jr. and someone else for a couple of races, Steve Addington will be the crew chief of that car. And for the 39 car, of course, they'll be driven by Ryan Sieg. Mike Sears will be the crew chief. This is a really solid crew chief lineup. Brad Parrott and Steve Addington have won a lot of races, some races in Cup, and also a lot of races in Xfinity, and they've had a lot of experience in the sport, so that's big for RSS Racing. Of course, it'll be a 3-car team in 2023. Those are the crew chiefs. I think these are a really solid crew chief lineup going into 2023, and we'll see how the team performs in 2023. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ross Chastain. Now, Ross Chastain was being interviewed by the media this last couple of days, and he said he's basically happy about the wall ride being banned, and he's very happy he will not have to do it again anymore, because he felt like it hurt when he ended up doing it. Ross Chastain, of course, pulled off one of the most impressive moves in NASCAR history, pulling off the Hail Mary wall riding basically to the checkered flag. Unfortunately, that has been banned, which I think was a good decision in all essence, because you don't want that basically happening once again. I think it's a good decision. Glad that they are not going to be allowing that move to happen anymore. I was mad at first when they were talking about it, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense for them to go ahead and ban the move. So it definitely made a lot of sense for sure for them to go ahead and ban it. And overall, I thought it was a really good decision and a really good call that they've gone ahead and banned it. But that is just my honest opinion on that. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Race for the Championship. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday evening that NASCAR will not have a full season docuseries in 2023 like it did last year for Race for the Championship, but they're planning for a playoff version. But it's unclear what TV network is going to be the one that they are going to go ahead and use for that. Now, of course, in 2022, they had Race for the Championship. And I thought the docuseries in general, I watched it a lot, and I thought the docuseries was really, really good. Unfortunately, what happened was the fact that this took so long to basically get finished, and it took way too long to get done. Well, not too long to get done, but no one was watching. The problem was no one was watching. If no one's watching it then, of course, the ratings are going to be bad. The ratings were terrible because they had it on Thursday nights on USA, which, of course, the only people are going to watch are hardcore NASCAR fans. And I think the goal for a docuseries is you've got to have it, I think, on Netflix if you want it to help grow NASCAR, because that's why Formula One's been growing in the United States, because of the fact that it was basically on Netflix, and it grew there. So it's definitely disappointing for sure. There's not going to be a full season version, because I think the full season version was definitely really, really good. But I'm not shocked or surprised. So it's disappointing news for sure. There's not going to be a full season race for the championship, but I'm not shocked or surprised about it, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kyle Busch. Now, this is posted by Dalton Good on Twitter and multiple people that Kyle Busch looks like he has a new sponsor. And it looks like it is going to potentially be McLaren Grills. Now, McLaren Grills, they do have an Instagram page, and they were actually spotted on the hauler as well. This would be the second actual new sponsor Kyle Busch would have. Of course, he does have NetSpend, which, of course, was not an original partner of the RSR group. They're going to sponsor Kyle Busch in quite a few races this season. And it looks like maybe Kyle will get sponsored by McLaren. It's not the McLaren F1 team. It's the McLaren Grills. Regardless, though, it is good to see that it looks like Kyle Busch will have a new sponsor for 2023. So it's really good news for sure overall that it looks like Kyle will have a new sponsor in McLaren, because that's been one thing we've been kind of wondering about, is if we were going to see a new sponsor for Kyle. So glad to see that Kyle Busch looks to have a new sponsor in 2023. Really exciting stuff. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, Tony Stewart, of course, has been in the Fox broadcast booth and was in the broadcast booth the last couple of days. And on Saturday, he actually praised Kyle Larson on what Kyle Larson ends up doing and going out running a lot of different events. That is really high praise coming from one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. Even Tony kind of said that Kyle Larson was a better driver than Tony is, which is a huge compliment to Kyle Larson. But Kyle Larson, of course, is running a lot of different things, and he's getting up to speed very quickly in everything that he competes in. But to have Tony Stewart praise Kyle Larson as much as he did, I think is absolutely incredible stuff. And I think that's really good stuff in general for sure that he praised Kyle Larson right there. And we've seen a lot of people praise Kyle Larson. Mario Andretti has. I think it's the second or third time that Tony has praised Kyle. And we know that, of course, Tony won Kyle Larson on his team a few years ago. But it is really exciting stuff regardless that Tony's praising Kyle Larson. I think it just shows that Tony has a ton of respect for Kyle Larson, and it just shows that he has a ton of respect for him. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Nice Motorsports. Now, it was reported by Casey Campbell and Cody Efa, who is the general manager of Nice Motorsports on the channel. And basically, he says that they'll be running 3 trucks in 2023. They also confirmed they're not going to be running an ARCA program in 2023 at all. The 41 truck will return as an all-star truck. The 42 will be driven by Carson Hocevar, and the 45 truck will be driven by Wallace Allen this season. The 41 truck, from what I understand, I would expect that Ross Chastain will for sure be behind the wheel of that truck at some point this year, and probably other drivers, maybe from Cup, will get an opportunity. And the reason I say Ross Chastain is because of that Worldwide Express experience and basically that sponsorship, plus he drove for Nice Motorsports in the past as well. We'll see what happens in Nice Motorsports going forward, but that's what's going on with the team going into 2023, and Nice Motorsports will have 3 trucks in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about a potential rumor around Team Hezeberg's. Now, it was reported by Jacques Villeneuve News, and we've heard rumors about this recently, but apparently Team Hezeberg's might not even be returning to the Cup Series at all in 2023, and they may be completely out of shop, and they may no longer be a thing in 2023. Now, right now, keep in mind that is just a rumor, but if it does end up coming true, it's going to be very unfortunate because it's been kind of TBD and TBA on if they were even going to show up or not this year because they haven't really announced anything, which their social media's kind of gone dark and they haven't really said much about 2023. But if it is true that this is truly it for Team Hezeberg's, it is very disappointing news because I feel like Team Hezeberg's, the team really had good progress. They were running top 30 in events. I know they struggled at times, but they were bringing 2 cars to the track. They were performing at times, and it's just disappointing if this truly is the end for that team. It is very disappointing because that's another team that kind of got bucked by the charter system not being allowed to have a charter. It's just really disappointing news regardless, and it's kind of disappointing and unfortunate, but it also is not the most shocking news, if that makes any sense. So disappointing stuff for sure if this truly is true, but it really isn't the biggest shock if they don't show up, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kevin Harvick. As Kevin Harvick was asked by the media about him running the 2024 Daytona 500, he said no, he's not running the 2024 Daytona 500. Now, Kevin Harvick, of course, has confirmed something that we'll talk about later in this episode that you're probably watching, but Kevin Harvick, of course, will not run any NASCAR races in 2024. In fact, he basically confirmed it not too long ago that he's not going to be returning at all past the 2023 season and that this is going to be it for him at the end of the year. I definitely think maybe in the long term, maybe Kevin Harvick's back for a one-off because we've seen drivers come back for one-offs in the past, but I'm not shocked or surprised that Kevin Harvick is, as of right now, not considering making a return here in 2024 in any shape or form. So, not a big shock, not a big surprise that Kevin isn't going to run it. I'm not surprised by that, and I'm not shocked by the news that he's probably not going to be running at all in 2024 or in the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Sammy Smith. As it was announced a couple days ago from Tricon Garage that Sammy Smith is going to drive the 17 for Tricon Garage in a season opener at Daytona. The driver will drive that car for most of the year. Taylor Gray has not been approved for the first 3 races of the year as he does not turn 18, but he does have a playoff waiver, meaning Cup veterans are likely going to be driving the cars and trucks for the next first couple races. This will also be the first time Sammy Smith has driven in the Truck Series as he is a TRD driver, which is going to be really good experience for him. Truck Series field is getting stacked. I think Sammy Smith will be a threat. He's got a lot of experience, and I think that 17 truck is going to be really strong and really fast, as I expect it to be a very solid team. Tricon Garage, I think, is going to be a strong team throughout the season. Wouldn't surprise or shock me if Sammy Smith wins. He doesn't have a lot of super speedway experience, but I think Sammy Smith will be a threat for sure in the race. I expect that 17 truck to be really strong. I think he has a really strong run, and I think Sammy Smith will definitely be a threat in the 2023 Truck Series opener at Daytona. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Brett Holmes. As it was announced on Friday that Brett Holmes is going to be driving in the Truck Series full-time in 2023 in the number 32 truck. Brett Holmes only ran a few Truck Series races in 2022, so I'm very excited about this for Brett Holmes. Brett Holmes, I think, is a very talented driver. I know the last couple of years they haven't ran too much in trucks, but I think this is big in general for that team and for him to run the full season because, like I said, I think Brett Holmes is a very, very talented driver, and it gets another truck on the entries in the field and a pretty solid competitive truck because I think Brett Holmes will have some solid runs. There were times last year where I think, and a couple of years ago, where he was competing for top 15s and top 20s in the races on straight-up speed, which is really good for a team that is still a very small organization and is really on the up-and-coming currently at the moment. In general, I think this is really exciting news for that team that he is going full-time. I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes top 20 in the points because I think he could have a good year. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people going into 2023. And I think Brett Holmes could be a pretty big shocker and a pretty big spoiler throughout the season. So we'll see what happens, but very happy to see that he will be basically full-time in the Truck Series in 2023. Really exciting news for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ty Gibbs. Now, if you watched Cup Series practice from the LA Coliseum, you probably saw the fire that took place. And it was a very, very violent fire. Now, NASCAR during the off-season has basically been working to try to fix this problem, and they've had the problem fixed near the end of the year after the Kevin Harvick fire. Unfortunately, though, this seems like the same issue or some sort of issue that's similar to what happened last year has unfortunately creeped up once again. They basically just spontaneously combusted and basically exploded, which is really, really scary. And it's a shame, too, because Ty Gibbs had one of the fastest cars in the practice session. It is very scary and very concerning to see this situation coming up, and I hope that NASCAR can resolve these issues. Now, we did not have any more of those problems happen, but probably a situation with the rubber once again coming into play, played a role and played a factor into why that basically happened, which, like I said, is very concerning because you don't want that kind of stuff happening because there could be really big issues and repercussions that could end up happening for that. So, very scary situation for Ty Gibbs. I'm really glad he climbed out of that car because that was a very scary fire, and we don't want to see drivers end up getting hurt. So, glad he's able to climb out of his car, and glad to see that he was able to get out of the car because that was very scary, and that was extremely dangerous what ended up happening. So, glad to see him get out of the car because that was extremely scary, and it was definitely really, really concerning for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Austin Dillon. As it was announced on Friday that Austin Dillon is going to drive the 10 for Kaulig Racing at Auto Club. This, of course, is the third driver confirmed for Kaulig Racing this season in that car, as we're going to see Justin Haley in select races, and also Landon Castle will drive in a few select races. But the reason why that car is an all-star car in 2023 is due to funding problems. Landon Castle was initially supposed to drive the 10 car full-time in 2023, but unfortunately, he had some issues with Voyager. Voyager's in a lot of trouble. There's talking that company could go bankrupt, and crypto in general is having a lot of problems currently at the moment. So that's why they have drivers like Austin Dillon and Justin Haley coming into play. I think Austin Dillon is going to be a threat for sure to win that race. That 10 car was really, really solid and really fast last year throughout the event. I think they had some issues last year where they fell out of the race, but I think Austin Dillon is for sure going to be a threat in this event. I think his car is going to be really, really strong. I expect the 10 to be really quick, and I think we're going to see Austin Dillon be a threat in 2023 in this event. So watch your Austin Dillon because I think he will definitely be a threat for sure, and he's definitely going to be one to watch for sure in the 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series season and select race he runs. How many he runs, who knows, but glad to see he'll be running the Xfinity Series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As Bob Pocker noted in that tweet, that Kyle Busch might return to the Xfinity Series in 2023. If he does return, he would end up driving for Kaulig Racing. Now, Kyle Busch has not raced in the Xfinity Series since 2021 because he actually retired at the end of 2021 for the Xfinity Series. But I think that with that, I think he wants to maybe return to Xfinity because we all thought maybe he was going to return to last year, but he kept his word and stayed out in 2022. But it sounds like there is a very big growing possibility, and in the garage, people have been saying that there's been talk that there may be a possibility that Kyle Busch could return to the Xfinity Series, which would be definitely interesting if he did return to the Xfinity Series in 2023. It would definitely be really exciting for him to come back for a couple starts because I used to complain about Kyle Busch racing the Xfinity Series back in the day, but nowadays I don't really have a problem with Kyle Busch racing the Xfinity Series, especially since it's limited how many starts he can run. He can only run 5 starts in the Xfinity Series, so he's limited how much he can run. So I don't have a problem, especially with the limits. I really don't have a problem with Kyle Busch racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, at least on a few starts. But it'd be very interesting because he'd be very, very fast. I don't think Kyle's as good as they used to be, but I think they're still going to be really fast this year. I think they could be a very competitive team. And it would give drivers like Daniel Hemrick and Chandler Smith some help if guys like Kyle Busch would come into play. But it sounds like there's a possibility this could end up being the case, and we may see Kyle Busch return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2023 on select runs. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Clint Bowyer. Now, Fox had their panel and basically was speaking to the media about the 2023 season, and Clint Bowyer basically said one comment that got a lot of talking. And he says that the NASCAR product right now is better than anything F1 is doing currently at the moment. I think Clint Bowyer is definitely right on this. I know that Formula One has definitely been growing in the United States, but Clint Bowyer is definitely not wrong. I think the NASCAR product on track is definitely way better than what we see in Formula One because while, yes, Formula One is definitely growing here in the United States, basically, I agree with Clint Bowyer that it's basically doing a lot better. Well, NASCAR racing is definitely a lot better than Formula One. But NASCAR definitely is going to have to find a way to grow their audience and find ways to grow that audience going future because Formula One is catching up to the United States. And if we see that Andretti deal go through, NASCAR is going to have a lot of competition. I think the fact that you got Ford coming into play and going over there, which we'll talk about them here in a little bit in this episode, but if they go over to Formula One, there's going to be a lot of changes there, and I think things are going to have to change regardless for NASCAR. They're going to have to try to find and figure out ways to grow because right now we're seeing a huge growth of Formula One right now, and NASCAR is going to have competition. But I absolutely agree with Clint Bowyer that NASCAR's product is definitely way better than Formula One's at the moment. I think NASCAR's product is definitely better than Formula One. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo. Now, Road and Track put out an article and basically says that Daniel Ricciardo wants to test a NASCAR stock car. Now, this is not the first time that Daniel Ricciardo has shown some interest in NASCAR. There have been some talk that Ricciardo was maybe going to come over and race in NASCAR this year, but he basically denied that and said he was not going to be coming over. But now, with Ricciardo not being a full-time driver in Formula One in 2023 and being a reserve driver, he's definitely going to be open for potential racing. So this could potentially mean that he maybe gets an opportunity to drive the Project 91 car because a lot of people want to see Daniel Ricciardo come over and race in NASCAR. Daniel Ricciardo is a big fan of, a little bit of a fan of NASCAR, of course, a big fan of the Earnhardt family more than anything else. But Daniel Ricciardo is, like I said, showing interest and wants to come over and race in NASCAR and has kind of said that in the past. I know he denied that recently, but I think he still wants to come and race in NASCAR, which I think would be really, really exciting because he has a pretty big fan base and also a pretty loyal fan base at the same time as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in does decide to test a NASCAR stock car, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see if he does decide to go ahead and test a NASCAR stock car in the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Briscoe versus AJ Allmendinger. Now, if you watch Cup Series practice, you saw Chase Briscoe and AJ Allmendinger get into it in practice. Chase Briscoe kind of dive-bombed the corner and got into AJ, and then AJ retaliated during practice and got into the back of Chase Briscoe. I'll be honest here. They should not be tangling in practice. I think for 100% both these guys are racing. I don't think anybody's really at fault. I know it's practice stuff, but I think actually both of them are at fault for the incident. Because, again, I don't think there's one person gets example. I think both get fault because they shouldn't be racing like that. It's practice. You shouldn't be acting like we're racing like last lap at Daytona during a practice session. I just got really frustrated at that and it kind of frustrated me a little bit that basically they were trying to wreck each other during a practice session, which I think is stupid. You're practicing. They both got to calm down. I really think, first of all, AJ was more, if we had to give more fault, AJ is because he kind of caused the wreck. but he had Chase Briscoe dive bomb in the corner, which is like, okay, y'all need to chill out a little bit. You're not racing for anything here during a practice session. Y'all got to chill. But that's just my honest opinion on that, and I just hope that we don't see a rivalry between these two, because I like both these drivers. So it's interesting for sure, and it's interesting that they tangled during practice. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Justin Haley. Now, this is something interesting that we heard during the broadcast for qualifying, because, of course, Justin Haley won the pole for the initial pole for the Clash. Justin Haley basically said on the broadcast he's actually in a contract year with Kaulig Racing. This is kind of surprising to me, because I thought Justin Haley had a long-term deal, but it sounds like that was only on a 2-year deal with Kaulig Racing, which is kind of surprising considering he's been with the Kaulig Racing Group now since around 2019 in some sort of way. And I think he's done really good with the Kaulig Racing Group over the last couple of years. So I was definitely really surprised to hear this news, but again, I think that they may be looking at other drivers perhaps, but Justin Haley putting up a really strong qualifying performance probably should convince them to keep him. And I really think that Kaulig Racing would be losing a future asset, because I think he is a really talented driver and knows how to get it done. He's a really talented driver. He can do really good. I think Justin Haley is going to surprise a lot of people this year, especially with AJ Allmendinger coming up to run full-time this year. I think AJ is going to be a really big benefit to Justin Haley throughout the season. I think this is going to be really fun to watch, this pairing. I think both are really talented drivers, and I think Justin Haley is going to surprise a lot of people going into the 2023 NASCAR season. So we'll see what happens. I really hope he gets extended long term, because I think he deserves to stay at Kaulig Racing. He has some strong words. He got 3 top 5s and 4 top 10s, which is better than I think some of us thought he was going to do last year. Finished top 25 in points. I think we could see a pretty big year for Justin Haley, and I hope he does stay long term with the team, because he deserves an opportunity to stay with the team long term. I hope he does get to stay with the team long term in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Joey Logano versus Kyle Busch. Now, if you watched the Cup Series race last night at the LA Coliseum, you saw the situation between Joey Logano and Kyle Busch. On one of the 5 or 6 early restarts of the second half of the race, Joey Logano sent it going into turn number 3 and got into Kyle Busch. After the incident, Kyle Busch basically said to the media that he says he owes him a few. After that, it says Logano's did that to me a couple times. He says he owes him a few. Joey Logano, speaking about Pockers, he actually took responsibility and kind of owned up to it, and basically said he's kind of happy that Kyle Busch was able to get back up in front. I think that's the first time Logano's ever said that and really taking responsibility, because a lot of times Joey Logano will cause a wreck on track and not take responsibility. So it's really good to see that Joey Logano actually took responsibility for a wreck, because Joey Logano was definitely a fault for the wreck, no doubt about it. Now, Kyle Busch was able to bounce back to finish 3rd in his first start with the team, which is really, really great news. Our start was pretty fast throughout the weekend, and Kyle can admit that Austin Dillon was better than Kyle Busch in the race. But I will say that Logano took responsibility. I know that Kyle and Logano have had history in the past, and they've kind of wrecked each other, got into each other many, many times throughout the years. Kyle has shown they got into it 5 or 6 years ago. But I really believe that both these guys could sort out their differences, and I'm glad to see Logano took responsibility for the incident, because I definitely think Logano was for sure at fault, but I think it's really awesome and amazing to see that Joey Logano took responsibility for something, because he was clearly at fault. So glad to see that Joey Logano definitely took responsibility for the incident. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin versus Ross Chastain. Now, Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain go back to last year. They've had a rivalry in the past, and the rivalry kind of came back this weekend at the LA Coliseum, as Ross Chastain basically just sent it into the corner and got into Denny Hamlin. Like I said, both these guys have had a rivalry in the past and have gotten into it in the past, so maybe we're going to see this continue going into 2023. I want to see this rivalry continue, to be honest. I want to see Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain continue to get into it, because last year the rivalry was really, really fun. We saw both of them have interesting comments throughout the year. We saw the Gateway stuff, and if this continues, we may see a fight between these two, which honestly, I want to see the fight, because I absolutely love fights, and I hope the rivalry continues between Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain throughout the year, because I absolutely love when those two get into it, because I think it's really, really fun. And I hope we continue to see this rivalry between those two drivers, because Both are drivers up front. They're going to be fast throughout the year, and they're going to be contenders for the championship throughout the season. So it was really exciting stuff to see that. I think it's interesting regardless, and we'll see what happens, but it does. We'll see if this rivalry continues. I kind of hope it does continue going forward, and we do continue seeing a rivalry between these two, because I thought it was really, really fun and really interesting stuff to see that both of them were continuing to get in a rivalry, and I hope they continue to get into a rivalry in the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ford. Now, it's reported by Jerry Bonkowski, I believe, on Saturday morning, and there's been talk about Ford's future in NASCAR, and some because of the whole F1 deal now with, of course, Ford partnering up with Red Bull to go over there in 2026. They have a new engine deal with that team. There was a lot of question and talk about Ford. Well, it sounds like there won't be actually basically dropping their program as much. The talk that Ford might actually expand their program in 2024 to counteract Toyota's expansion plans. David Wilson has talked about the fact that Toyota might actually expand their program going into the 2024 season. So Ford might counteract and try to bring some teams over in 2024. Ford, of course, does have a pretty big partnership, and they have a lot of teams currently at the moment. They've got Team Penske right now. They've got Farmer Motorsports. They've also got, of course, SHR. They've also got RFK, and they also have Ware Racing as well. So they got about 5 or 6 teams currently at the moment in the Ford program. And maybe they're going to try to go over, maybe get some of the Xfinity Series teams, or maybe bring over some of the Chevy, because Chevy has a lot of teams right now. They, of course, lost Live Fast Motorsports over to Chevy this past year, so Chevy has done some of their expansion for the year. And it sounds like Ford wants to get more teams on the grid, which is going to be really interesting to see what happens in regards to Ford. Maybe we see some teams come up from the lower series. Maybe NBM Motorsports comes up on a full-time basis next year. Maybe we see Hezeberg maybe return, even though there's rumors that the team might be gone. We may see them come back. Who knows at this point? But it sounds like Ford wants to expand going into 2024. And that expansion talk is going to be something that we're going to be watching throughout the off season to see what happens in regards to that. But we'll watch to see what happens, and it sounds like Ford is trying to make talks about potentially expanding their program in 2024. It's going to be very interesting to watch to see what happens. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about NASCAR on Fox, as their 2023 broadcast lineup for multiple of their series has been officially announced for the Daytona 500. First, Josh Sims is going to be on pit road. Josh Sims, I believe did some pit road reporting, of course, I don't think he did any pit road reporting for the LA Coliseum weekend, but he will be on the pit road for the Daytona 500, which is really big. I like Josh Sims, so glad to see he'll be there. For the Xfinity Series race, Ryan Blaney and Austin Dillon are going to be up on the broadcast booth. I think Ryan Blaney and Austin Dillon have done a really good job doing insight and Xfinity Series broadcasts in the past, so really excited to say that both of them are going to be in the Xfinity Series booth. And in the Truck Series booth, there's some pretty big changes coming, as Adam Alexander and Jamie Little are going to rotate the Truck Series booth. With Vince Welch no longer being at Fox Sports and leaving Fox Sports as he announced around New Year's Eve, both of them are going to rotate the booth. Let's first talk about both of them. Jamie Little, I think she has done okay in the ARCA broadcast. I don't think she's done absolutely great with the ARCA broadcast, but I think she's done an okay job with the ARCA broadcast, and she, of course, did commentate the Truck Series race at Knoxville. I'm going to be honest here. She didn't do a great job with the Truck Series broadcast in Knoxville, but I don't think the Truck Series broadcast in Knoxville in general was just on her. I think in general the broadcast itself was not very good, but I think she should do an okay job. Adam Alexander, though, this is what I'm really excited about, because I was not the biggest fan of Adam Alexander back in the day, but he has really grown on me as a lead commentator. He's done a really good job as a lead commentator, has done a very strong job, and I think he will continue to do a really good job, and I think he's going to make the Truck Series booth a lot better next year, because I feel like the Truck Series booth, there was no energy. He is going to bring a lot of energy to that broadcast booth that's been lost for such a long time, and I think he's really going to be a big benefit to that broadcast booth going into this year. So I really hope he can continue. I really hope that he can do a good job, because the broadcast really needs it, but I think Fox in general is going to have a better year with their broadcast, because I think their broadcasts are going to be better this year than they were last year. So really good stuff for sure. I think Adam Alexander is going to bring a lot of energy to that booth, and I think the Truck Series booth has needed it. So very happy to see that he will be bringing it to the booth and doing a good job hopefully there in 2023. I think he will do a good job in the truck booth. I think he'll be the lead commentator for Daytona as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Bubba Wallace and Austin Dillon situation. Now, obviously, I'm not going to spend too much time talking on the Bubba Wallace situation here, but basically, there was contact between both of them, and Bubba Wallace got tangled. Austin Dillon basically said he felt bad for Bubba, and basically he said, and they both spoke about it, Bubba Wallace was not too mad about it, and basically said, didn't really want to talk much about it, which I can't blame him. There's one comment, though, from his situation I wanted to kind of focus on in situation at the end, the last 10 seconds, where he said, head hurts and back still hurts. That is extremely concerning, considering the fact that we've had situations with the next-gen car. We do know that the next-gen car, as basically they try to fix the next-gen car. To hear Bubba Wallace saying that basically his head still hurt, I think a couple drivers said that they were still expecting during the season that there were going to be problems with the next-gen car, despite the changes they made to the rear clips of the car, because they've tried to make the car a little more flexible and have a little more give in the car. The fact, and I know it's like a quarter cutting track, so getting hit in the back, you're going to have that more likely than other tracks. I don't know if this will be an issue throughout the year, but it is very concerning to hear that this is still an issue in year number 2. I know NASCAR is trying to make some changes, but the fact they're only going about 50, 60 miles an hour and they're still complaining about that is really extremely concerning. So I hope NASCAR can kind of fix this issue and figure out what's going on in that front, but I do hope they can figure out a way to fix that issue going forward when it comes to that, because that is kind of a problem. If it is a thing, they got to fix that issue with the rear, because if the rear is still a problem, that does have to be addressed, and it does have to be fixed 100%. So we'll see what happens in regards to that and see if NASCAR does kind of go back to the drawing board in regards to that area. But it sounds like there could be issues still with the rear, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Christopher Bell. Now, a couple days ago, Christopher Bell kind of talked about the fact he was not allowed to race dirt on David Gravel's podcast and kind of showed a little bit of frustration there. Well, Christopher Bell basically this past couple days, he kind of took back those comments and kind of addressed the comments and stuff, and basically said that Joe does not really show a lot of dislike. Deborah told him his dislike for dirt racing and kind of took his comments back a little bit. Now, could this be a PR stunt? That is a very big possibility to kind of stop him from talking, or it could be Christopher Bell telling the truth. Anything is possible at this point, but it's interesting that he kind of cleared up that kind of stuff up. He kind of wanted to clear it up, but I wouldn't be shocked or surprised if it was a PR stunt from Joe Gibbs Racing to keep him quiet a little bit. Wouldn't surprise or shock me if that was the case, because we know that Joe Gibbs probably wants to keep Christopher Bell around long term, because there was a lot of speculation and talk, and people thought, hey, Christopher Bell's not really happy. He wants to go dirt racing and stuff. And I understand that Joe probably wants to keep him out for safety and look out for his health and stuff. But at the same token, in the same time, Christopher Bell, if you let him go run as much as he wants to, you're going to get the best version of Christopher Bell. And I hope that Joe Gibbs will. If it's true that he didn't let him run, that definitely needs to change for sure. But it's interesting that Christopher Bell kind of went out. I wouldn't be surprised if the PR told him. We kind of shouldn't have went online publicly and said that kind of stuff on David Gravel's podcast. Wouldn't surprise or shock me if they told him basically, hey, you shouldn't probably have said that. So it's interesting kind of to clear those comments up, and basically because it really got a lot of traction on the YouTube and all the platforms. It got a lot of traction, and it got a lot of talking point. I kind of talked about on my channel a couple days ago, because we need to see the best version of Christopher Bell, and if he gets allowed to race, that's the best version of Christopher Bell you're going to get. Look at Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson basically was able to go out and run whenever he wanted to, went on Win 10 Racing Cup, and win a championship. Kyle Busch wasn't allowed to run as much as he wanted to, and his former struggle. So I think at the end of the day, you've got to let Christopher Bell run as much as he wants to, and I hope that can change at Joe Gibbs Racing. But if it's true that he basically cleared it up, at least that's a good thing, that his relationship is not strained with Joe Gibbs, because they need to keep him long-term, for the long-term future especially. So hope these comments are true, and I'm glad to see he kind of cleared up those comments and cleared up the frustration, because I think he definitely was frustrated speaking about it, because I think he definitely wants to go and race in other forms. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kurt Busch. Now, Kurt Busch is speaking to Larry McReynolds on the Fox broadcast basically on Saturday during practice, and Kurt Busch says right now that he is still not cleared to race. He says he's working hard to get back, but he still is not cleared to race currently at the moment. Kurt Busch said that about a month ago, I think, at the Hall of Fame ceremony, that he still has not been cleared to race, but he's been working hard and working on his exercise and stuff, and is trying to get back to the racetrack, because he definitely wants to come back and race in a few races in 2023. A few races that have come to mind are Darlington and Watkins Glen. But before he can even run those races, he has to get medically cleared to run those events. Now, hopefully, really, really soon in the not-so-distant future, he will be eventually able to be medically cleared because Kurt Busch definitely wants to come back and return. Because remember, some people thought Kurt Busch completely retired from the sport. That wasn't the case. Kurt Busch still has to be medically cleared, though, and it is a little concerning that he has not been medically cleared, but Kurt Busch is definitely an older driver. Kurt Busch will be 45 this year, so if he does return, he'll be one of the older drivers in the Cup Series. But we do want to see Kurt Busch 100% come back, and you want Kurt Busch to 100% be healthy before he does decide to go ahead and make a return to the NASCAR Cup Series. And I know that he definitely wants to come back and run a few races, and if he does make a return, he'll drive that 67 car that Travis Pastrana is going to run. We could see more drivers maybe in that car as well, in the 67 car. Of course, like I said, Travis Pastrana is going to drive that car, and there's other drivers that could drive as well. But Kurt Busch definitely for sure wants to make a return, and Kurt Busch definitely is working hard to get back. And the fact he's trying to exercise and stuff and has been working on that stuff is really, really good. He's still working towards it. He definitely wants to come back. He's being smart by taking care of his health, which is the most important thing. I do hope this year we get to see him in the Fox broadcast booth in the rotation, maybe after Daytona 500, or maybe at Las Vegas. That would be the perfect race for Kurt Busch to make a return. So we'll see what happens in regards to that. But it does sound like Kurt Busch is still trying to make his way back. But right now, he has still not been medically cleared to make a return. Currently, at the moment, we'll see what happens. And hopefully, eventually, Kurt Busch can get medically cleared so he can return to NASCAR here in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the LA Coliseum. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the future of the LA Coliseum, about this event eventually maybe becoming a points-paying race. Multiple drivers were asked by Dustin Long about potentially making this a points-paying event. Joey Logano was pretty blatantly, and he said in an interview, he said you cannot do that and you cannot make this a points-paying event. He said that you can even go one lap without a caution, and you could have a lot of frustration, and even the pace car, I think, was hitting the back of the field, and basically said that you cannot run 40 cars on the racetrack. Denny Hamlin said sarcastic comments and basically said that we should make this a playoff race. He's joking, by the way. He's not being serious, but he was being very sarcastic about this being a points-paying event. Martin Truex Jr. says, no, why not screw up a match event? Basically said, you got a really great event right here. Why screw it up by making it a points-paying event? And then Michael McDowell basically said, and agrees with Joey Logano's comment, saying that this should not be a points-paying event. I 100% agree with all these drivers right here. This should not be a points-paying event. This race yesterday, while I did enjoy the event overall, this becomes a points-paying event. The LA Coliseum ends up becoming a points-paying event because there's talk about it becoming a points-paying event. If it was to become a points-paying event next year, you're going to have a lot of really pissed off and a lot of angry drivers and a lot of angry fans as well. For me, I'm okay with this being an exhibition event and being on a schedule for the LA Coliseum for the Busch Light Clash because it's gotten a lot of rejuvenation in the Busch Light Clash. And I thought the crowd yesterday was really, really solid. I think about 50,000 people this every day were expecting a show, which is very similar to last year's crowd, which honestly, 50,000 fans for the LA Clash, Busch Light Clash for the second year is still really, really good. And the TV ratings are really going to tell everything as well, how many people decided to tune in. But making this a points-paying event, you're going to have a lot of yellows, and you're going to have a lot of things. And speaking of that, let's talk about the format as well. Next year, the format has to change. Caution laps not counting, a little frustrating. Maybe expand the event a little bit, or make the event a little shorter. I think maybe making the laps a little shorter, maybe 100 laps, would have definitely been something they could have done for this event this year, shorten the event up. And I think the fact that last chance qualifiers are 50 laps and the drivers not being able to refill, that was really frustrating. But I do not want to see this as a points-paying event. It would be a disaster. It would be really, really bad. And I think it would be a bad call if they were to make this a points-paying event. So let's not make it a points-paying event. It would be bad. I think as an exhibition race, yes, keep it as an exhibition on the schedule. I'm fine with keeping it around as an exhibition next year. And it will be an exhibition event maybe likely next year unless they do make it a points-paying event because we'll talk about that why here in a little bit. But let's not make this a points-paying event. Let's keep this as an exhibition event going into next year, and let's not make this a points-paying event. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories of today's episode as we are talking about Jimmie Johnson. As Jimmie Johnson was on the Fox broadcast booth yesterday, did some commentary, and he confirmed that he will run the Cup race at the Chicago Street Course. This is now the second race that Jimmie Johnson has confirmed for 2023. Jimmie, of course, confirmed that he will run the Daytona 500 in a couple weeks in the number 84 car. He will, of course, will have to attempt to qualify in the Daytona 500 as that 84 car is not chartered for this season. This is now the second race that Jimmie has confirmed. It's unclear how many races Jimmie is going to run for the whole season because he said he's going to run around 10 races in general in all forms of racing. He also, of course, is going to run the Garage for the 6th entry at Le Mans. Of course, that still has to be approved by the ACO, but it does sound like there's a really good chance that that is going to get approved. This is also not a surprising race because Jimmie has shown some interest in wanting to run this event in the past. He's wanted to run this race, and I think he will be somewhat of a threat. Now, I know Jimmie was decent on road courses. He only got one or two road course wins, but it's really good that Jimmie wants to run this event. And again, this is not a shocking event that he is going to run. He's shown interest and said it last year even on Series 7 NASCAR Radio. He said he wants to maybe in the future run the Chicago Street Course event. And he even considered maybe run the Busch Light Clash next year in 2024. But I think in general, in all seriousness, in all honesty, I think that Jimmie Johnson will have a good chance of making the 500 field, and we're probably going to have another full field for the Chicago Street Course race, and maybe even guys going home for that event, which I think that is going to be extremely exciting and more full fields. And really awesome, though, that Jimmie is coming back to run that race because I think Jimmie Johnson will definitely be somewhat of a, well, I don't know if he'll be a threat. Maybe he gets a top 20 or top 25, but it's really good that Jimmie's getting to run whatever he wants to run and go and run whatever races he wants to run because some people think it is going to taint his legacy for him coming back, and while it might be true, I think it's just more exciting than anything that Jimmie is making a return and wanting to come back and run what other events he wants, and it's big that he is coming back for this event. If I had to guess what other events Jimmie could run in Cup this year, North Wilkesboro is one that comes to mind. I know he has talk about wanting to run the Indy 500, but he's kind of sounds like that might be off the window, so he might run North Wilkesboro. I would have to think maybe Auto Club is a possibility, but again, I don't know if he'll run Auto Club. I know it's his home track. Maybe Sonoma, perhaps. A track I like to see him run is Gateway. I would love to be maybe there, and if he ran that would be really exciting. But the rest of Jimmie's schedule is probably going to get revealed throughout the rest of the season, so really good stuff for sure, and interesting that Jimmie Johnson is deciding to make a return, and glad to see he'll run the Chicago Street Course event, and happy that he'll run that event in 2023. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we are talking about Auto Club Speedway. As it was officially announced on Saturday afternoon that Auto Club Speedway will not host a NASCAR race in 2024. The big reason why they will not host a NASCAR race is 2024 is still because of the conversion and the process. At the end of 2023, and it's, of course in a couple weeks, will be the final 2-mile race at the Auto Club Speedway because they are planning to convert Auto Club Speedway into a half-mile track. And they've had a lot of issues getting the track prepared. They had to delay a year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and they had a lot of issues basically getting the product started and getting the process started. Which they have been working on the process. They've been taking stands out, but they're way behind on the process, and that's why this event is not going to be changing in 2023, and we will not see a race in 2024. I'm going to say a couple things. One, it is really disappointing news, and there's not going to be a Cup Series race at the Auto Club in 2024. The race last year in 2022 I thought was really, really good, and I do think the race in 2023 is going to be really, really good as well. I also, however, am not surprised about this, and I'll explain why I'm not surprised about them basically, this event not happening in 2024. I'm not surprised, and it's because of the fact it took so long for them to get started working on this event. Again, the fact that they basically have had delays, they've had issues getting everything done. I know that, like I said, they've been working on trying to get it done so they can convert it to the half-mile track. But at the meantime, in the same token, and the same time, it is frustrating to see this situation kind of come front and they're not going to be running because I think Auto Club has produced good racing. But I know people say we should now have reconfigured the track. I think we need more short tracks and people need to show up. I'm fine with them becoming, I know it's frustrating that people don't want it to become a short track, but I don't think it's a bad idea for it to really become a short track. The big question now is what ends up replacing it. I know some people bring up the fact of Kern County and Irwindale, and I would love for them to go to another short track. I think Irwindale's in some trouble. Kern County, they've got some work they need to do on that, but it would definitely be a good track to go to. Rockingham would be a potential good choice to go to. Rockingham, they won a Cup race in 2024. We know they've had conversations with NASCAR. I know NASCAR's talking about making some big shakeups to their schedule next year, so that could be a potential big possibility. Another potential possibility, and I want to shout out Jarrett for shouting out us on the stream last night, why not move Sonoma to earlier in the year and then go ahead and basically have Chicagoland come back. I think moving Sonoma, Chicagoland around, because I think they're both owned by IAC, if I'm not mistaken. Move Sonoma to the spring, because that would make a lot of sense. And then have Chicagoland come back for 1 year. People want Chicagoland back on the schedule, and I would definitely try to go out to that event next year if it was to return. Then it could be around the Chicago Street Course weekend, be really close to that event and be in that Chicago area. I think it would definitely make a lot of sense for sure for them to return to the Chicago Speedway for 1 year as they work on Auto Club. It's unclear if they even will be ready for 2025, and I'm not surprised for sure about this because I think Auto Club, like I said, has produced good racing. But if you want my pick, Chicago comes back for 1 year in 2024 and moves Sonoma to earlier in the season and have the West Coast swing. Sonoma looks so much better in the spring, and you could have a road course as second event of the year, which would be really exciting. And I've been wanting Sonoma as a spring race for a very, very long time. Again, very disappointing news, but not surprising news to see that Auto Club will not be hosting a NASCAR race in 2024. Not shocking and not the most surprising news, but disappointing to see that Auto Club will not host a race in the 2024 NASCAR season. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we are talking about Kevin Harvick. As Kevin Harvick officially confirmed on the Fox broadcast last night during pre-race that he will be officially joining the Fox Sports booth on a full-time basis in 2024. He will join Mike Joy and Clint Bowyer for the 2024 season. For the last couple of years, for 2022 and 2023, we've had a rotation of people inside the booth, but now Kevin Harvick officially confirms he'll join the Fox booth in 2024. I am very excited to see that Kevin Harvick is joining the Fox Sports booth in 2024. Kevin Harvick's done commentating in the past, and I think he's done a lot of commentating with the Fox group in the Xfinity Series and some commentary in the Truck Series as well, which he, of course, will do 4 Xfinity Series races this year with Fox. And he will also do, I think, 2 or 3 Truck Series races this year as well with Fox. I think he has done an excellent job as a commentator, and I think he is going to do a masterful job with the Fox Sports group. And here's the thing about Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick does bring a lot of energy to the booth, and I think he's going to be that really good middle ground because you got Mike Joy, of course. This next year could be his last year in the booth, depending on how contracts and stuff go, because Mike Joy is definitely starting to get up there in age. Mike Joy, by the end of 2024, is going to be around 75 years old, so I don't know how much longer Mike Joy is going to be doing this long term, but you need someone to come in there on a full-time basis, and Kevin Harvick definitely fits that mold, and the Fox booth really needs it. There's a lot of issues with that booth. There's been problems with that and stuff, and I think you're going to have a good booth. Then, of course, you have Clint Bowyer coming back next year, and I mean, I like Clint Bowyer somewhat. I don't think Clint Bowyer is absolutely amazing by any stretch of imagination. I know some people get tired of Clint Bowyer, and trust me, at times, I do get tired of Clint Bowyer as well. But you got that middleman who's in the middle who can bring that entertainment and stuff, but also can do a really good job providing that insight. And I think Kevin Harvick is really going to do a great job providing that insight because I've enjoyed him doing commentary in Xfinity, enjoyed him doing commentary in trucks, and I think he's going to provide a really strong commentary for 2024 next year. And it's really great that he'll be in the booth next year. And I think, like I said, he's going to do a really excellent job in the commentary booth in 2024. And this is really exciting, I think, for the long-term future for Fox. In fact, they've got Kevin Harvick coming up to the booth next year. I think Fox has been really needing because I think they've been struggling the last couple of years. You can tell Mike Joy's definitely getting really frustrated. He was getting a little frustrated with Clint Bowyer and retweeted something earlier. He's kind of just trying to focus on the race and stuff. And I hope that Kevin Harvick, with him being in the booth, they can get that booth more focused on the racing than everything else on the track because, like I said, there were times last year where it was getting really frustrating. It was kind of getting frustrating to watch, and I hope that he can kind of get in there, get things sorted out, get things straightened out with that broadcast booth next year because they really need to get things sorted out with that booth because I feel like they lost that mojo and lost that magic. The fact now you got Kevin Harvick coming in, like I said, I think it will bring a lot of that magic back that Fox has been missing for a while. I think they should have brought Larry McReynolds back full-time, but I digress. But I really think with Kevin Harvick coming in here and taking over doing commentary for the booth next year, being the middleman and doing it on a full-time basis, I really think he's going to be a huge asset to the booth next year. I'm so pumped he's coming in there. I think he'll do an excellent job. He's done a really good job in the past doing commentaries. And like I mentioned, and like I said, I think he's going to do an excellent job next year. And again, it'll probably kill with Xfinity. He's probably going to be the lead commentator once again for the Xfinity Series, drivers only broadcast, which will give him a little bit more experience before he gets in 2024. It's really good it's finally been confirmed, because this has been expected for a while that he was going to be in the Fox Sports booth. The reason they were doing the stopgap kind of stuff was because they thought that this was going to happen. Basically, they did stopgap year for 2 years because they were really waiting on Kevin Harvick. He was going to retire. But really awesome for sure, though, regardless, to see that Kevin Harvick is officially joining the Fox Sports booth in 2024. I think he's going to be really fun, and I think he's going to provide a lot of really good stuff here in the 2024 NASCAR season. Excited to see he's joining the booth. I think he'll do an awesome job, and I'm really looking forward to see that Kevin Harvick will officially join the Fox Sports booth in 2024. I think he's going to do a really awesome and a really great job in the 2024 NASCAR season. I think it's going to be exciting and really fun. So, that is for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so you know notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links are below over that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Kevin Harvick joining the Fox Sports booth in 2024? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel, including Auto Club not hosting a Cup race in 2024? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, I'm probably potentially going to have a 2023 Daytona 500 Intros update, unless we do get a lot of NASCAR news. On Wednesday, will be another NASCAR news episode. Thursday will probably be something else on the channel, not exactly sure what. And then on Friday, we'll have another NASCAR news video. And this weekend, of course, is Super Bowl. I have Super Bowl picks coming out later this week on my second channel. Make sure to subscribe to that second channel. I might link it in the description for you guys to go check out, because there's going to be Super Bowl picks dropping on the channel here in a couple days. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.